So we started building React components. And what we learned over time is having two different tech stacks is a nightmare to manage. I think we just got really lucky with the right leadership in place, and that realized ahead of time, okay, we have this UX department, but design systems are coming along. They saw the benefit, understood the benefit, and started putting a team together. It did look like we just flipped this switch overnight, but that took months and months and months of work behind the scenes. So learning to kind of slow down and also when to say no, I guess is another one.
Hello, and welcome to the world of design systems, Philip. So a little intro before we start. I have been a Kajabi user for over 4 or 5 years. And when I saw the rebrand, my first thought was, oh my God, there's so much work behind the scenes happening right now. And I would love to know more, and also how you tackled all the design system things and everything connected with product design and development. And since you're a senior developer, I would love to hear more about your perspective, but maybe let's start with introducing you. So you can introduce yourself and what you're doing at
Great. Yeah,
Kajabi.
and I'll say first off, thanks for having me. This is super exciting. I've been quite fan for quite some time, so it's very exciting on my side. But yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm Phillip Lovelace. I'm currently a senior UX developer on the design system team at Kajabi. I traditionally had a design background. I actually started in more of your traditional web design. Worked for many years in the U.S. and abroad. And while I lived in Germany for about 6 years. And while I was there, I had a small web design studio. And I kept getting, delivering designs, which was great. But then I would get clients that asked, could you help us build it? And at the time I couldn't. But then that led me into the path of front-end development. And I've been doing that for years and years now. Lived in San Francisco for quite a while, working for various companies, education companies. And then I just happenstance come across a job posting that really caught my eye, something about design systems in this company, Kajabi. And needless to say, it worked out. They were actually forming a team specifically for design systems. I'd always been more kind of in the front-end engineering, front-end development space. And this kind of got me into the world of design systems. Yeah, 5 years later, we formed a team and have a pretty stable design system that used throughout the company. And yeah, that's kind of how I made it to Kajabi. Yeah, you mentioned the rebrand. That was an exciting time, lots of work. I'm sure we'll get into it, but massive shout out to kudos to my team and everybody there. It was a lot of work and it seemed to go very smooth, and so we're happy about it and continuing to move on. Exactly.
So when you joined, you were doing first version of design system, and now it's already the second one,
Yeah.
rebrand.
Well, as far as rebrand goes, we did, I guess about 2 or 3 years ago, we did kind of a design refresh. It wasn't a full rebrand. This time around, it was a complete rebrand. So yeah, I started from scratch. There's myself and 2 or 3 other people at the time, and we've grown a little bit since then. But yeah, we started with the very first implementation. We were way back then. We were designing and implementing, developing and implementing into the product. So we were kind of working on the design system, and then we would take the components and actually build them in. And so that also helped with kind of adoption, and I'm sure we'll get into that later. But yeah, very first, and then yeah, this is so our third. To answer your question, it's kind of our third iteration, and then we've got some cool stuff coming as well.
So how did it all start? And I mean, what did you change from, let's say, version 1 until now? And what did you learn?
Oh boy, okay.
How was the journey?
So version 1, I'll say, was very, very quick in the sense of we had kind of put a team together. We're building a new design system. We need to get it into usage, right? So like I said, we were developing as fast as we could. Any component, just starting with small components, and getting those into the actual Kajabi interface that the customers use. So that started off as Ruby on Rails back then, and Kajabi was mostly Ruby on Rails. So we started kind of that. I'll say version 2 was a new design, but as the company grew, we had more and more developers that wanted to use React, things like that. So we started building React components. And what we learned over time is having two different tech stacks is a nightmare to manage. It's a lot of work, multiple components, things like that. So heading into the rebrand and a little before that, we've started, looking into web components and kind of going that direction. So we only kind of have the one code base, and that's kind of where we are today. We made it through the big rebrand and all that went great. And now we're just kind of shoring that up and starting to think about, web components and that whole, we're doing a lot of development there. And yeah, so it's been super interesting. I guess the one thing I think I learned was to slow down a little bit, because once you kind of add something to the system, our team's responsible for it, right? And way back when we were first starting, we were putting a lot of stuff very quickly to try to get adoption and more code into the admin interface, because we also wanted the developers to start learning and figuring out how we're supporting them and how this could be a good thing to use. Yeah, moving too fast can cause mistakes.
It's really interesting that you were actually put together already in the start, because this is quite rare that the company knows, okay, we need a design system team, let's form a team, let's employ people, and then you start working together. What was the team like in the start, and how many people are now in your team?
So it's a shout out to our VP of UX. So we're kind of lucky in the sense that Kajabi, we have a UX department. We have UX research, design, product design, and then the DSS team, or design system services, we refer to it as. So our actual design system developers. I think we just got really lucky with the right leadership in place, and that realized ahead of time, okay, we have this UX department, but design systems are coming along. They saw the benefit, understood the benefit, and started putting a team together. I believe at the time our VP of UX and then a designer who's no longer with us they were just starting to see how design systems were playing a big part in, I think, other companies and things like that, and decided to put a team together. It started off small. When we got there, at least from the development side, they kind of had some Figma files and stuff where they were, starting to put those together. So they had an idea of kind of where they wanted to go, and then they just needed, the development to start and start putting it together. So that's where I believe there were three of us, three new hires that were all hired kind of at the same time. And then we've grown. There's 6 of us, including now we have a manager, dedicated manager, a couple dedicated designers. So there's like six of us, including my manager, and then 2 designers that are, 2 to 3 designers that are dedicated, but we can definitely, work out more designers, because designers have cross-functional responsibilities. They're also involved with cross-functional teams. So, but when we do need help, we're kind of given the resources. But to make a long story short, we just got really lucky that our leadership understood and kind of knew the benefits.
You're providing products, you have marketing stuff, you can send emails, you can add courses, and of course, I imagine you have a lot of components to manage.
Yeah, I should have probably counted the number, but yeah, there are a lot. We've kind of tried to do, in design systems, the whole consistency thing comes up a lot. So we've tried to build, reusable UI as much as possible. But you're right, there's a lot in there and a lot you can do. And initially we kind of kept the system scoped to just the admin interface that our customers use. So it wasn't really outside of the admin at all. But over time, it's kind of grown, and now you can find the system used in, like you said, we have many different products, and then there's things like marketplaces and our checkout and different member areas. So like our customers that are actually purchasing, it's starting to trickle into there as well. So it's a big set of components, and even that sometimes, as I mentioned, like kind of as we move forward, we historically figure out like maybe that's not the best way to to have so many, but to kind of simplify and kind of reduce the size over time, because it's just the more spread out you become, the harder it is to know where all it's being used, right?
Mm. But what's the process for when you need to use the old component and switch to new ones? Did you change everything overnight? Did you had like a priority list? and what were the pros and cons of your process if you look back now?
Sure. Okay. So let's see. When you need to use an old component versus a new one. So specifically regarding the rebrand or just in general?
Yeah, in general. I mean, of course, now you had the rebrand. Of course, you had to change the components. But for example, when you introduce something,
So in the going forward and doing something new, our systems are all import or basically all imported via packages, and the way we were kind of able to develop and work on the without leaking, everything to the customers is we had different versions, right? Everything has a version, and so you could technically go back and use the old system. Now you could just use an old version of the system. So usually what we kind of did is we developed behind the scenes with a new version, and when it came time to launch, it was kind of like, to the public anyway, it did look like we just flipped this switch overnight, but that took months and months and months of work behind the scenes to update all the components and tokens and all the new values and new tokens and new components that needed to be developed. So all of that took months and months of work behind the scenes, but to the public and our customers, it did look like just a switch overnight. But the way we were able to do that was the way we version our system.
yeah, because some companies, let's say, they introduce a drop down, and immediately when it's a new design, they just push, and then it's a mix of old components and the new.
Yeah, and I think we get a little bit lucky there in the sense of, like, for instance, if we did have a new drop down, because we have kind of a dedicated development team, we're actually able to go into the product and kind of switch those out ourselves. We don't necessarily have to rely on another engineering team or put some work on their backlog. We can just do it ourselves. We don't always do that, but in certain cases we're able to do. We're definitely able to do that. So I think that's a big thing, is like we do have that dedicated development team. So not only can we build components, if we have to, we can actually go into the product and build features and, swap out components and things like that. So that's always super helpful.
So how did the collaboration, I mean, how did you collaborate with designers on this huge task? Did you first redesign the whole platform and then like divided the components, or did you just reuse the old components and redesign them? How did that look?
So kind of a one step before that. So we also have the marketing side of the house, right, who kind of took the lead on the rebrand, and they had worked with our product design team. So while all that was going on, we took that time, at least for the design system team, to kind of do some prep work, I guess you'll call. So we went back through the entire kind of code base, looking for any, tokens that were misused or that weren't using tokens, things like that, and kind of started switching out our tokens, just doing like general maintenance and cleanup, that happens over time. So that really set us up for the actual work into the system. We knew everything was kind of, tokens are updated, values are correct, components are being used, and then that kind of led us into big collaboration phase with our design team. They kind of have to inform us of what's changing, what they're going for, all the new colors. And
Okay, so I guess in your case, it's not hard to sell all the work for design systems internally, because
Sure.
do you use Figma for designs?
We do use Figma, and we got some pretty cool automations there as well. And kind of our icon library is all handled through Figma, meaning designers can add their SVGs and everything to a Figma file, and then that gets consumed, and we have an automated process that then builds it into an actual library that can be imported. So we use it for that. Through like Token Studio and things like that, we're starting to go kind of that direction with our tokens and stuff. So that's been phenomenal for variables in Figma that also match up with the same thing in code. So that's been great. And then also just your general like components, all those are kind of designed and handled in Figma as well. So we do have it, like I said, a couple dedicated designers that kind of handle that side of things. And then as far as myself, I'm more on the developer side, but we do, I'm in Figma all the time looking specs and, naming and things like that.
So did you start by using Token Studio even before variables, and now you just export tokens to variables?
Exactly. So yeah, well, initially we didn't do that. We were kind of using just more traditional style dictionary, that type of things, and then kind of it was a little disconnected. Design had their variables, and then we also had our CSS, and we did our best to kind of keep it synced up. But then Token Studio came along, and it's very interesting how we can sync it all together. It becomes more automated that way, and less work overall over time. So that's just been, and that's something that we're moving toward right now. Like, it's kind of in-flight work, but it's kind of where we see it, at least for our system right now, the best way to go.
What's the best thing for you as a developer, that you get tokens from Figma, that you don't have to open Figma?
Sure. So I think the best thing for us is that for when our developers are actually building, our cross-functional developer, our engineering teams are actually building, that everything is in alignment, right? They see a value here, they see a value there. They don't have to guess if it's different or, anything like that. It's all synced up and kind of across the board. So whether they're looking in Figma, in the code view, in CSS, wherever it is, it all aligns. So it's just less guesswork, for our engineering team, which is great for us. And then it automates it, obviously, for us, which is, less work. But ideally, it's just one of those steps. We wanted to make sure that any confusion around token naming or anything like that is all synced up, and for our developers mostly.
Do you think that was the hardest part, to get a compromise about naming tokens?
Boy, luckily I didn't have to work a lot on the actual naming. So I consider myself lucky there, because as you well know, naming is hard. And kudos to the folks on my team who decided, they had interest there. And that's one thing that's also cool about my team, is like, if someone on the team has a specific interest in something, accessibility, documentation, tokens, they're kind of encouraged to go into that and make suggestions, and let's figure it out. Obviously they have the support of the team, but it's like, so, and I'm sure a lot of your resources were used as well as others, to kind of come up with the naming structure that we have. But yeah, that is a huge undertaking. I'm glad, at the end of the day, I'm glad I didn't have to do it, but I'm thankful someone was interested and took the time.
I think that's the number one challenge that teams have, just to
Yeah,
have a workshop about the naming.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Whew.
But do you think it's because it's a huge responsibility, because you have to live with this decision? Or is it because people don't understand why this is important?
Sure, and I think it comes, and a little bit of a note, like, I didn't do a lot of work there, but I think it's a combination of both, right? Naming things is hard, and then it's like, if we mess it up, it's going to cause even more work. But I think one thing that was helpful for us is, like, we used to have more of a flat set of tokens, meaning, like, we didn't really think about, like, your core tokens and your semantic tokens and your component level tokens. And we kind of decided, okay, we understood that was a gap for us. So yeah, the amazing teammate decided, like, look, we know this is kind of the best way to go about it. We just need to educate ourselves and figure out, how we're going to do it, and then implement it. I think once, like I said, we're kind of given a little bit of freedom to do that research and kind of figure it out the best solution. And then if someone's interested, that's even better. And we had someone interested, so that kind of gets presented back to the team. And it's like, yeah, all the research we've done, everything says this is how we should be doing it. Now let's figure it out and do it. But yeah, so I think it's a little bit of a combination of both. It's also super challenging. Like, it can be, I think, just kind of looking from the outside, it's a very daunting task, right? It's a lot to figure out. And especially when you already have a system in place, when you're thinking about replacing tokens, I think that can make it even a little more challenging, going from, an old set to a new set that works a little different. It's like, ooh, this is going to be fun. So yeah, so I think it's a combination of the two.
Once you publish them to the repo, it already feels much, much better.
Yeah,
Even if
yeah,
it's just the
definitely.
first version. So do you see that you could automate part of the design tokens? For example, just linting the names or the usage, if it's right or not.
Yeah, so that's yeah, I mean, technically, I guess, yes, we could, you could do things like that. I don't know that we're quite there yet, but that does, like, I'm gonna make a note, obviously, but so but yeah, I could see things like, linting and things like that. And that's more something I've also been kind of thinking about, just as part of like our tooling, and because we have a lot of linting and stuff on the code sides.
So what do you use for documenting guidelines? Do you keep everything in Figma? Do you have Storybook or something custom? I know that your design system is public, so people can also see it, and I will share the link.
Oh, great, yeah. So a combination of all three actually. On the design side, there is documentation. I think they're using a couple plugins, and then obviously redlining and things like that where needed. And then on the development side, we initially started, as I'd mentioned earlier, we were kind of everything was built in Rails. So as a way to kind of dog food our own system, we built a documentation website using our own components just to kind of see if we could actually build with it at the beginning. So that worked out great. And that doc site, has been around for a little while now. But at a certain point when React kind of started coming along, and now with web components, we do use Storybook. We kind of still maintain all three, I guess you could say, as far as like all three. It's two Storybook sites and our like documentation website that also contains like design guidelines and things of that nature too. So yeah, so it's a combination of both.
So when, for example, new designer joins, they can check Figma and then also go to Storybook and see how components work like live.
Precisely. Yeah, precisely.
Why did you decide to share the design system online for public?
Yeah, I think it was just one of those things early on we were like, oh, well, this would be cool if we just built a huge, not necessarily huge, but open source kind of design system, give back to the community, and that's, I think when a lot of people get into it, but then it's like, then does it just become another framework that is just sitting there? Luckily, we do use it inside of a product, but we just felt there was no real reason to hide anything. They're UI components. I think they're probably less useful for most people because they are kind of Kajabi flavored components. But also, I think in general as a team, we also understand the industry's growing, and the more stuff that's out there and the more things people are talking about, like it kind of helps us all. There's many times where I go look at other public systems and, see what maybe they're doing or maybe vice versa, So I think it's cool to, and I don't know if this is a company view, but from myself, it's also a little bit like giving back, and let's all put everything out there and see what we can, as a community can come up with and share what we're learning. And even through things like this, it's phenomenal. So there was just no real reason to kind of, hide it, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think it's very beneficial because even if there are, 1,000 drop downs, you can still see some inspiration from companies that are made in the e-learning space or doing something similar. When you look back, what would you say that was the best thing you did?
Boy, biggest mistake. Too many rebrands. I mean, that's what that's how I just made it through, right? So it's like it's a lot of work to update a system that is used so widespread, right? And I'm only joking there, but it's like, and where my mind is, it's like less rebrands would be great. But realistically, I think for me personally, I spend a lot of time in kind of the support role for our design system, like helping other developers and things like that when questions come up, lots of support requests and things like that. To me, that's one of the best things I've done, and the sense of I feel like it's helped, because there's this age old thing like design systems are trying to be gatekeepers and things like that. Like, oh, you can't do this or you can't do that. And I think that's helped me build the relationships with our engineering team. Being on the support side, it's like, you know, there are humans over here, and yes, we're making decisions, but we're not gatekeepers. And, spreading that knowledge, like this is how we're here to help. We want to take all these little decisions off your plate and let you worry about these big hairy problems and the products you're trying to build. So for me, that's the biggest thing I've learned is like you just have to get out there and kind of communicate it. And that helps a lot, I think, with reception across the board, from leadership to all the way down to your engineers who are using it on a daily basis. Yeah, it's just that's the biggest thing I think I've learned is communication is key, and it can be tough, but there's different ways to do it, right? I did it through kind of a support role, when people have problems, and that's always fun to deal with because they need answers and they need them quick. But it's like at the same time, I use those as kind of education moments of, why we're doing this, and obviously trying to help them fix whatever issues they have. But it's secretly on the other side, I'm also using those as communication moments.
So let's say there's a person that wants to introduce new component, they come to you or your team, and what's the process to accept new component?
So that's kind of the first question we always have, because obviously, like I had mentioned way back when some of these components we probably don't belong in the system, but at the time we were trying to build as fast and make a system. So today it's actually, there is a process behind. We usually try to look for things that will help at least 3 teams. It's kind of how we look at it. So if we see a request and it comes through and, we're like, well, that's kind of the first time we've seen it, right? So maybe we start thinking about it, see how feasible it is. But then if it comes through a second time, it's like, okay, guys, this is number 2. And then obviously if it comes through a third time, that's when we're like, okay. And then the collaboration there is usually we go talk to the team, start involving the designers more, and like, okay, we've seen this come through a few times. Should we turn this into a component, some type of pattern? So there is a process there. Typically, it starts with either a developer reaching out through our support channels, or like a ticket gets created, and we start investigating. But we generally have a rule of 3.
Okay, so once you do the component, do you also test it? Or do you have some kind of metrics behind for the whole design system?
Sure. So testing, yes, we do testing. Like I said, our shared documentation site is kind of where we handle that. So we build our documentation site out of some of our components. So we can go that route, or there's Storybook. We also have QE resources or QA resources. So we're able to kind of utilize our QE team as well to kind of help us out and make sure things are working. Yeah, tracking. So we don't historically kind of track anything like adoption or code coverage. And I think the reason that is because we have a dedicated development team. So at certain times throughout the years, we've kind of been the team going in and removing old code and updating it to new components and things like that. So adoption kind of more of an organic thing for us, where we were actually doing the work, right? So I didn't really need to track if developers were picking it up or anything like that. I guess I could say one thing is we do kind of track our documentation website. So just like analytics there. So I can see, like, if all of a sudden a spike in traffic to a certain component happens, it's like, well, is that a new developer, or is something going on there? The developers are looking at that page a whole lot. Like, what is this? So I do kind of keep a little bit of eye on those things, but it's something, we've discussed over time. Maybe, at some point we will, track component usage, but we've been lucky in the sense of, like I said, our development team kind of kicked it off and started, building with it. And then over time, kind of all of our engineering teams have picked it up. And that's kind of the de facto way we just build in the product today.
Yeah, it would be completely different if you would have to prove the quality of design system and also that you really need
Exactly.
it.
And that's where I say, like, we really lucked out with our leadership understanding, from the get-go, like, the benefits. And
Are there any cases where you had to remove some components?
some of that goes back to naming. I think early on, we had a badge, and we had what we called a label that looked like a badge or a tag. There were a couple different names, and they got built in a little bit different ways. And then, we would go back and look at, like, oh, this actually is all very similar. We should just combine it into one, right? So that type of stuff happens. Also trying to build like big, huge kitchen sink, I'll call them, components that you think can do everything. We had one in the beginning we called panel controls. Inside of the Kajabi interface, we have a bunch of pages where it's basically just a list view of different things: courses, products, podcasts, whatever. It's just the same list view, kind of like an index type page where it's just a list. And once you pick one, you go into and kind of edit and everything. But we early on thought, well, it'd be great if we just built one big set of panel controls for these lists. So like all your searching and filters and sorting and all that stuff built into one big component. And that thing was a nightmare. It's like, it worked good, I think, the first time on the first page we implemented, but it's just like, it's just too big and try to do too much at once. So that goes back to the, try not to build the kitchen sink components, because they go haywire pretty quickly, at least in my experience. So I'm sure there's
Kitchen sink. I like the name because it's like in Figma, where people create components and then they put a lot of slot components and maybe if you need some other options. And then in the end, it's harder to write documentation how to use Figma component than just reuse or create separate components.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's historically also, as we were getting into it, we just had a kind of a different mindset of, instead of like, smaller, kind of using your primitives and a nice layout system to kind of construct what you need, we thought, well, we'll try to be smart about it and build these big, massive components. And that was just something, I think through trial and error we learned and kind of avoid these days.
It's better to just simplify. So how do you see, you already touched a little bit about automations and what do you use, but how do you see AI tools, or where do you see design systems heading in the next few years?
Yeah. So in the next few years, I think it'll continue to simplify. In the sense of, like I was just talking about, a robust layout system with your kind of smaller primitive components. To me, that just kind of where at least in my head it's going to go, is kind of we don't need these giant components and things. And then as far as AI, yeah, I'm obviously using it in kind of different ways, and like we do automate a few things, and we have a lot of AI tools inside of Kajabi product itself, not necessarily related to the design system. So I can see, usage or it being useful across the board. But I think things like you were saying with like testing and kind of linting and kind of letting AI handle some of that stuff, and also helping with documentation, I think would be good. And then your previous guest had also mentioned like using it to find patterns, which I thought was phenomenal. That was really cool, that I hadn't really thought about. But yeah, it's like, yeah, do we actually miss those sometimes? Like, so I thought that was cool. But I think documentation, and then things like, because I work closely with our engineering team, like the developer support, maybe being able to help generate, give me a login form, and here it is with all your components, right? Or whatever you kind of need to speed up that process. I think could be cool. And we're seeing a little bit of that, like, with all the AI and our code editors and things like that today. But it's like kind of having some of those dedicated tools, focused on your system could be really cool from a support standpoint as well.
And just giving instructions for new developers where your repo lives, how to implement some stuff. Even this can be really beneficial.
Yeah, yeah. It's like your kind of onboarding system documentation. Yeah, that's where I see it's going to be super useful, because as humans, sometimes we get stuck down in the trenches, creating these components and things, and it's like, and I'm probably guilty of this more, so it's like, I think I need, it's like, note to self, document this, make sure I do that, and then time goes on and I forget, right? And it's like, it would be cool to have kind of an AI partner or whatever help me out with those things where I might be lacking.
Yeah, because it's quite hard that AI would just take the existing components and replicate for new ones, because there are so many things behind that AI is not capable yet. But if you could go back, let's say, and change one decision you made in your journey or design system journey, what would it be?
Was going to change.
To rename.
Yeah, yeah. So I think I would say something along the lines of, I had mentioned a little bit earlier. So kind of two things here. Moving fast and breaking things has kind of always been that, thing in the tech world where like, yeah, we should move fast and break stuff. That does not apply to design systems. You will break things, and in some cases, some important things. So, and I think it was Josh Clark recently semi-recently that had an article about like, slowing down and kind of, I couldn't agree more there. I think it's, you can't rush it, because there's a lot of from the code side, but also a lot of the people in our case, and some of these companies have huge engineering teams. Ours is pretty large, but compared to, the big guys, it's So learning to kind of slow down and also when to say no, I guess is another one that I wish I'd have kind of learned earlier on. Not like no as in we're gatekeepers or anything, but just as in like no, that doesn't actually belong in the system for this reason or that reason. I think those two things, kind of, if I could go back, learning to pick those two up or use those, slow down a little bit and learn how to say no and push back, would be kind of two things I wish I had to learn on.
Yeah, really cool point. Because the easiest thing is to open Figma and just, create a component and say, oh, yeah, we're really fast. We can just implement stuff. But then in the end, you realize it was not what people need.
Sure. Or you make a mistake and, take down production for a few hours.
But what would you say that it's the most overrated thing in design systems?
Most overrated. Oh boy. These are tough ones. Let's see. Rated. I think just that it has to do everything, right? Like that has to be used for all UI across all product. It's just it's more of a and I don't want to say support in the sense of like you need help, but it's more of a support system that's going to get you as close as we can, for most cases, but there'll always be edge cases and custom things you need. So it's like that it can be everything to everyone. I think how I would put that. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, it's just like there's there's a reason we do it and there's great benefits behind it, but it can't be everything for everyone, right? It can't accomplish it all.
Yeah, it's not a magic wand that once you have it, it will solve all your problems with being slow. It actually just shows where are your black dots in the process, I think.
Yeah. And I think one other thing I would add there is also that there are humans behind it all in the sense of, there can be tussles and, disagreements and things like that. And sometimes people feel like, we can be gatekeepers and things like that. And I would just encourage everybody out there just to remember there are humans making, lots of decisions in design systems. And usually we take these decisions very seriously. It's not just something, designers or developers just, make up because and we're also handling a lot of things, like accessibility that some folks may or may not think about, so there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And I would just encourage everybody to remember there's humans back here making decisions and, we're trying to do the best we can to improve, all around. So design, development, speed, consistency, all those things. But there are people back there.
So, where do you learn new things? Where do you find motivation or people that you can just talk about design systems or new stuff that you can implement then in your work?
Well, I briefly, I have to give a like one of my favorite things about working at Kajabi and in design systems and kind of, I think one of the reasons I've kind of stayed in that lane for, the 5 years now is the team I have. It's a diverse group or, awesome kind of, I'd mentioned everybody kind of has their own interest and different things. And that part has been amazing because it's like if I do have accessibility questions or I do have token questions, I know who in the group to go talk to, or we all get together and see what we think. And then obviously there's all the, the threads and the blue skies and your resources have been huge, I think, for the industry at large. So, everybody definitely check those out. But kind of going out, the more general, social, trying to do conferences and things like that when possible and, joining those. But I do rely heavily on my team and shout out to the team. It's it's a diverse, awesome group and everybody has different strengths and interests. So that's been a unique thing within my career is the team I'm on.
Do you work
But yeah, those are all remote. Yeah, we're a fully remote team, mostly a fully remote company at this point. That wasn't when I first started, that wasn't the case, but the world kind of got a little crazy there for a little while and the company and the team was growing, so we had to hire remote and now it's mostly remote.
Yeah, in a way, it's also easier to attract talent.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I'm kind of in my silo, and I don't get to discuss what else I might be interested or actually learn. I've learned so much from those individuals in different areas, kind of the automation, accessibility, tokens, the whole thing. So, and just general development as well. Like, because at the end of the day, we still are developers, but when I came on, I wasn't very strong in React at all. Hadn't kind of used it much, TypeScript, those type of things. And I'm still not 100%, but it's like I've become way more comfortable, and obviously I can tell my own skill set has improved, and I owe that to those individuals. So it's been a great experience.
I guess it's also beneficial for you that you were a designer before, because a lot of developers just don't see where's that one pixel difference.
Sure,
You know.
Yeah, yeah, that does help. And I will say on our team, that's kind of been somewhat common. Most everyone has either done design or was always interested in front end, which has been super helpful. But yeah, and it's good to have those type of people on the team because it's like maybe I missed a pixel, but they didn't miss it. You know what I mean? So it's yeah, it is a cool experience.
You have human linters.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
What's your favorite thing to do when you're not online and working and coding?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So few things, I guess. I actually 5 years ago, I had lived in San Francisco, the Bay Area, for about 10 years, working in there. And about 5 years ago, I took a position with Kajabi, and I moved to Southern California. So now I'm based in Southern California. And so kind of lately, my two favorite things to do are my wife and well, I'll reverse it there. I have two teenage sons that play high school sports. So most of the time when I'm not in front of a computer, you can find me in a gym or on a sideline somewhere, cheering on the boys, which I enjoy. It's fun. So my youngest son plays football and basketball, and my older son plays lacrosse. And but now that they're high school age, they can kind of stay home themselves, and they drive themselves around, and they're very much independent these days. So that's given my wife and I the opportunity to kind of start exploring Southern California. So we've been doing trips, to different cities because we moved to Southern California, but we didn't know a whole lot about Southern California. So we kind of started taking this, new freedom since the boys are a little more independent, and just kind of, so lately I just been calling it our, couple adventures. So that's been fun lately.
What was your favorite spot?
Okay. So far, I think we were in Santa Barbara, California, which is like near LA, little north of LA. But it's I like the vibe of the town. It has a very Spanish feel. And I think I'd mentioned to you earlier, my wife is from Europe, and her sister actually lives in Spain. So we spent quite a bit of time in Spain as well. It has a very Spanish feeling where like the mountains into the sea, and the town's kind of built right there. And there's lots to do there. So as far as like restaurants and, things to walk around and see. So that was kind of our most recent one. And that one was a lot of fun.
I interrupted you. You also wanted to say that you also like to go to gym, or?
Yeah. So lately, and this is funny, it kind of plays into the, my son's playing high school sports. So I guess about a year and a half ago, they were like, "Dad, we got to join the gym. We're playing football. We want to." So I signed us all up for 1 year. I thought, well, let's see how it goes. 1 year. After like 2 months, 3 months, they quit. They didn't want to go anymore. But I actually kept going. So it's kind of become, a thing to help me de-stress after work and things like that. So that's, I was never into exercising or the gym at all. So, but now it's kind of, at least for the past year and a half, I try to go. I saw a quote by Bruce Springsteen, I think, that said, they were asking him how he remained active so long and is still playing, concerts and things today. And he said, find an hour a day and sweat it out. So I thought, if that's the boss, I'll take the advice.
Yeah, I think it's a completely different feeling after the workout,
Sure.
Even if you're
Especially,
lazy and it's hard to do it some days, but yeah, after it's amazing.
I think as we're, as a remote worker right now, I'm sitting in a chair all day. So it's, and I'm not the once young man I was. So it's, it's like it gets important. So Yeah, but now I enjoy it, and it's kind of become a thing. So yeah, outside of work, it's like those three things, kind of, hanging out with my boys, hanging out with my wife, and trying to get some exercise when I can.
Like in design systems, foundations are important.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, and it's like, you know, it's and your community around, I think, is important too. Like it's you know, the
Yes.
old saying, it takes a village. I feel, I mean, this is not necessarily about outside of work, but I feel like in work lately, I've, Blue Sky is kind of growing and coming along, and there's a lot of cool design system stuff going on there right now. Lots of starter packs and things happening, and I feel like the community, at least right now, feels very vibrant there, and like I've been introduced to new people and things like that. So it's if folks haven't checked it out, definitely go check out kind of what's going on. There's a few starter packs out there, and it's it feels like a little bit like the original days of Twitter when we were all on there, and it was a lot of buzz going around. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I didn't join yet, so I was like, oh my God, another social network.
Yeah, yeah,
Not
that's
my
the thing too. Yeah,
try it out.
yeah. But also, I think it's important what you're doing on LinkedIn and things like that. I think LinkedIn is sometimes overlooked. I've learned a lot from LinkedIn and connected with a lot of cool people there. So that's like, I don't necessarily, and who knows, Blue Sky may level off and be a snooze fest. Who knows? But at least at the moment, it's kind of, it's a little fun over there, and just seeing how many people are signing up so quickly and things. It's cool to see.
I hope this thing. So I wanted to ask you, where can people find you, but probably Blue Sky is the first thing right now.
Yeah,
And
actually,
then
yeah, Blue Sky right now. LinkedIn, I think, is where I kind of spend most of my time. That's you and I kind of connected there as well. That's where I spend most of my time. I'm okay with accepting connection requests. So definitely reach out. I am Pixel Flips all over the web. That's mostly where I'm kind of everywhere. Yeah, Pixel Flips, pixelflips.com. That's my website. There's links there to all my stuff. Yeah, but the
I w-
Threads, Blue Sky, GitHub, the whole shebang.
nice. So I will put all the links under description. And really glad that you find a time already in the morning to meet on.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, no, and Romina, thank you so much. This has been awesome. I hope I didn't ramble too much. Sometimes I bet, and I hope any folks out there, like, definitely reach out, and if find any information helpful, I'd love feedback. So definitely reach out, and I'd love to see what other folks are doing as well. So yeah, but a huge thank you to you. This has been really cool, and I will definitely get up early in the morning to do things like this.
Yeah, and next time you're in Europe, let me know.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. I will do. Yeah.